How's it going, internets? I hope you're having a lovely day. It's that time again. It's time to get into some animation. Time to look at that imagination and give it all revved up and turned on and get into some creativity. And it's time to get inspired. And today's inspiration comes from Arthur Adams. If you're not familiar with his work, check right over here. He is a beautiful illustrator, comic book artist extraordinaire. He's worked on X-Men, Vampirella, just a ton of different Incredible Hulk, I believe. Just so many different great franchises that he's been a part of, and you can see each and every piece is chock full of character and great drawing, real amazing grasp of anatomy with a nice fluid and soft appeal. I really like the way that he renders females. I think that he also worked on Rocketeer. That's what I was thinking of. He does strong anatomy while keeping a really soft line, and that's a very difficult thing to do, to get these lines right in there. Get that such. I always feel that when, at least in my personal work, females are more difficult, I think, to master in rendering. Because you want to get all the anatomy in there, but you need to keep it really pretty consistent with a clean line in order to look more feminine, with more masculine or typical masculine attributes. It's okay to be a little bit rougher and it show a little more of the bones and the muscles and everything, but if you want to get that more soft, traditional feminine style shape, you really have to know your anatomy and be top notch on that, and be able to do render hips in a clean line and get that pelvic bone there, and then get the softness of the thigh go down there, and just to make sure you get that nice clean line is a very difficult thing to master, and I think he does a phenomenal job of that. So definitely check out his work. I will link to more of his stuff down in the description below, because I think he's just really top notch. One of my new favorites for sure. I loved this one. I thought the way that he did the hair and just how over the top that is, and definitely some great flow to his line work again. But I thought that was a great exaggeration. While and this is kind of another thing that, especially for someone who's into animation, which you guys are, it's that simplify and exaggerate. So he's got a fairly simplistic pose here. But then he's got this way over the top exaggerated hair, where everything else in the piece is fairly what I call vanilla or neutral. Not too expressive of a face, a little hint of an expression there, but the real expressiveness comes out there. And that's one of the things that you really want to try and find a nice balance between how much if he really did a really over exaggerated pose and really over exaggerated hair, I don't think that the piece would work as well. But a very simplistic pose and strong anatomy still. I mean, it's still a great piece, but it's very neutral, and then you've got this crazy contrast in the hair. I think it's a great design choice there as well. And then again, just more beautiful pieces from him. We'll let that G.I. Joe. That's great. Can't think of her name right now. It's killing me. Okay, but anyways, I want to share a quote with you guys from him as well, and that said, "After I decided that was what I wanted to do, that's all I ever wanted to do." And I think for me this is important, because I definitely, when I was in high school and a little bit out of high school up until I was probably in my probably about 24 maybe, in that range, I was definitely really experimenting. I traveled a lot. I played in a lot of different bands, read a lot, just really kind of went out there, hung out with a bunch of people. I drew here and there, but it was really about finding what it was that I wanted to do, and I'm very jealous and envious of those of you who know what that is already, and then just go from it from a very young age. I think that's really difficult. Now that being said, I had drawn some stuff and gotten some stuff in newspapers. I'd taken a couple drawing lessons when I was younger, and then always probably every once a month or so I'd at least pull out a sketch pad and do some stuff, but it was never really it hadn't really clicked with me yet. But then once that life laid out itself in the way that it did, and I really started, I heard the Clay Cadis podcast was in. I had just seen Spirited Away, and I just read The Illusion of Life, and all those things kind of within a few month period really solidified that was where I was drawn, but directed to go. And ever since then, I don't think there's been a day when I had control, and it wasn't a super chaotic day, that I haven't drawn since then. There was a little bit of life chaos thrown in there for a couple months, but aside from that, once I found what I wanted to do, that was what I wanted to do, and I think that's a good thing. And don't be afraid if you haven't figured it out yet. Just keep trying different things and keep experimenting until you find that thing that works for you, and then don't give up on that dream. Keep pursuing it each and every day. So that being said, rambling aside, let's go ahead and get into some animation. This is the AgentX rig. It's a free rig you can grab over at Creative Crash. I will link to it in the description below if you guys want to play around with it. And if you're not familiar with what we do here, first of all, thanks for watching. You guys are awesome. I love you lots. What we'll be doing for the rest of the video is we give ourselves 48 frames, 2 seconds of animation. I go off and I find a rig that I've never used before. It's a free resource for you guys to play around with as well. And we kind of go from there, a little bit of over the shoulder, hang out with me while I animate, a little bit of talking through the process, some instructions, some kind of technique, talking through. Overall, just having some fun with you guys. And the main goal of doing these videos each and every day is hopefully encourage you guys to go off and create your own stuff and inspire you to develop the habit and the desire to need to create and produce something, and not just be a consumer but a producer using your imagination each and every day. And so that being said, let's go ahead and get in here and do some animation. So I think I'm going to do kind of a stealthy walk backwards for this guy. That's what I'm thinking. So let's get that storytelling pose started here. Forward. And from the little I tweaked around with this rig, I usually just try and do a very minimal amount before I pop open the video, just because there's been a couple times where the rig was just totally broken and I could have adjusted that. Seems like this rig will be fairly fun to use and shouldn't have too many hiccups here or there, but we'll see. And let's contrast these arms. We'll do one that's kind of bent inward, and the one that's out in front here, we'll keep it out in front even more. And let's grab the chest here. Aesthetically pleasing rig too. I like this one. A little more realistic than a lot of the rigs out there that are free. That's cool. I like it. But you can tell this, and this is one of those things that I've definitely discussed, at least in personal life. I don't know if we've talked about it here, but finding that blend of hyper-realism, I guess, is a way to say it, but I feel like there's too many previous definitions of that, so I'd say like alternate realism, where you can tell that this is definitely stylized to be realistic, but there's still some definite, exaggerations and personal preference here, while still going with a fairly rigid anatomy. And I always like that when you don't stick 100%. I feel like that's the art form, is to try to blend readability and recognizability with a little bit of style in there as well, and I feel like this rig does a good job of that. So let's go ahead and bring these hips down a little bit more. And bend this chest a little bit more. Do that back a little bit. tweaking around, finding our good storytelling pose here to start with. I kind of like the little bit of bow-leggedness that I have here running through there. It kind of gives not a pure, clean line of action throughout there, but it's like that. And that's like this. It's a little bit kind of surfiness to it. So let's see if we can't push this. I'm going to just do a universal rotate because I want that to be a little bit further forward. And I think we'll do a little more open palm here. Let's do kind of a universal controller here. Kind of like he maybe had just walked into a group of bad guys and he's kind of steady, don't go too fast, kind of doing one of those hesitant kind of a pose or feeling here. So a little bit of stealthiness, but a little bit of trepidation maybe there too. And let's go ahead and say, again, always eager to see how each and every rigging artist presents the fingers, and this is a different way than I've seen before, so pretty cool there. And let's go ahead and just kind of turn this one into a little more of a grip here. And go and individually do each and every one of these fingers here. Maybe a little bit more there. Yeah, let's give a little bit of twist to that one here. And I think for myself, when I'm developing a pose, I usually will kind of grab everything and give myself a generic starting point and then go into each and every, at least with hands. So I'd take like a universal control and do like a grip or an open, and then once you have a rough one, then go into each finger and kind of sculpt out your pose a little bit more that way. It's just how it kind of works for me, so maybe that'll work for you guys too. It's kind of that, I guess it's a little bit of impatience on my part. I tend to like to get a rough timing down and a rough posing pass out quickly so I can sort of see if the whole thing works, and then once I'm there, then go and tighten everything down a little more. Again, let's go ahead and sculpt this. I think I'm going to keep the hand a little more flat, at least with the fingers here, but let's still kind of sculpt it a little bit, so get a little bit of an arc there. So we keep a little bit of arc in between those fingers. See that? There's a little bit of arc there, and I'll take that thumb and I'll just do something a little bit there. And maybe something like that. Okay, I think that's a fairly good starting pose. Then we'll do a couple little walk back steps, and that'll be good. So let's go ahead and save our file, and remember it's always important to save multiple versions to save often, and we are using Autodesk Maya for today's video. And if you want more information on that, check out the description below. Let's go ahead and set our first key here. And before I go too far, I always like to create a ground plane. It just, maybe you guys don't need that, but for me, I always like to have a floor plane underneath my character, or some semblance of a little bit of background or something when I'm working. Just helps me to visualize things a little bit better. And maybe you don't need that, but for me, I find it always is helpful. And so I set our first one there. And let's go back to 12. And I'll bring that foot back here. There. Go to 24. We'll bring it back there. And let's go bring the hips back here. Alright, and then again we're just going to set that here, set that one, go to 36, bring that back again, set that one again there, and bring that foot back to up there. And we kind of want to get, we'll get our spacing here in a second. And we'll go ahead and keep our our balance and everything through here. So let's first look at our translate Z here in the hips, and let's make that pretty universally consistent here. So we're not slowing in and slowing out, but we're having a pretty constant value. So we get that evenness in the amount of movement from right to left here on the hips. Doesn't have to be exact, but fairly close. And let's see. That's pretty good. I think this is going to be one of those times where I'm actually going to go 14 frames per instead of 12. So that would mean we need 2 frames there, 2 frames there, 2 frames there, and 2 frames there. So it'd be an extra 8 frames. So that would put us at 56 frames. And then we're just going to adjust everything we got here and delay it 2 more frames. We're just going to slow it down since I feel like it's a little too fast for walking backwards. And again, most walks are usually about 13 frames per step in an average speed. So you'd want to kind of just be a little bit slower than average there. Now, this pose here feels a little off balance. I'm not sure if I want to maybe just push the hips forward just a titch there. See if that would get our balance a little bit better. Let's check that now. I feel like the hips should kind of favor the front a little bit more since it's moving back to kind of keep the momentum going there. Okay, that feels pretty good. Let's go ahead and save our file since that's working now. And I feel like the timing's a little bit better, a little bit slower. Because you wouldn't want to be moving too fast if you were thinking it was a negative situation you wanted to get out of. You'd probably approach it, at least at the beginning, cautiously, and then once you knew you were kind of safe, you'd book it out of there. So if this was like a 2-part scene or a longer scene, we might have, these first couple steps where we've got a bit of hesitation or trepidation, and then right after this, we could like turn the hips and have them book it away. Or jump out a window or something like that. Might be a little too much up and down. Feels like it's okay, but probably scale it back a little bit more. Kind of even it out there a little bit. It doesn't have to be completely even. We don't want it to feel robotic, but I don't want it to feel like there's big jumps and little jumps really here, but more just some variation in it. It feels a little better. Put in some small steps here. I still want to keep the feet low to the ground, but we'll do a couple little steps. And apologies, it seems like it's saving a little bit slow here. So let's go back in and rekey all of our original steps, and let's go ahead and lift it up here at the passing position. And the reason I always go back and rekey it is just in case I didn't hit all the attributes down there. I don't want it sliding or anything else there into the new position. And so again, we're just going to go back in and hit S on the keyboard on all of those and make sure those are all locked in. And then we'll go in and get our passing position or our lift up here. It's always good to flip back and forth. You don't always want to look at something from one timing or one perspective or any of that stuff. I'm gonna feel like at least this foot feels a little too high for those steps, so let's go ahead and tone those down a little bit. We're still going to do some rotation in the foot, which will give it the appearance that it's not raising as high. So let's go ahead and drag that there. So I can still keep the translation there, but we'll add some rotation that'll help keep it feel as though it's not really lifting too far off of the ground there. Okay, and let's look at the other foot here. And I'll do a little bit of, I think I'm just going to vary it, just because I don't usually like to keep the feet doing the exact same thing there. And I'll do a little bit of drag back and then drag up before it lands. Just so there's some variation between each of those feet. And I might do a little less of this. That feels a little broken there. It's okay in the movement, but it feels like I should probably scale it back a little bit. And sometimes it's good to break things. It loosens up your animation a little bit more. But in this case, I don't feel like that's a necessity. And let's actually go 4 frames at the beginning instead of 3. So I'll push that over. Let's go and see that now. Okay, feels like it's working. So let's do the toes on there. We'll kind of polish these feet up a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the hips. And once you've got the legs and the hips working, that's a majority of the main part of your walk. So let's do a little bit of toe tap. We'll drag the toe tap down there, lift it up here, and it's got a weird, I would probably have had the toe tap be a little bit further back than just right there. I feel like that's not as good of a place to have that broken up, just aesthetically. Maybe anatomically it's okay, probably would be about there, but aesthetically it's probably would have been a better place to break it, would be right at the tip there. At least in my own opinion. You guys can disagree, feel free. Let's look at that now, just to help break up each step a little more. And let's look at this side here. Again, just gonna drag that toe down a little bit more here. Lift it up so you still get kind of that heel toe feeling there. It's a quick way to get that built into your walk, so it doesn't feel like the whole foot is just landing all in one frame and then it stops there. So let's look at it now. And let's do a little bit of twist on here. Let's go ahead and save our file again. And like I said, it's always good to save multiple versions and to save often, because you never know, it could have a power outage or computer crash, or the file could get corrupted or something. So it's always good to kind of have a little bit of a current animation up-to-date save, so that you don't lose too much information just in case something happens. Then you'd have to re-go in and do it, and because this is really not like a formula that you can just plug in, it's really an animation and a choice. It's not always the easiest to get the same feeling that you maybe had before with your shot. To recreate it would be pretty difficult, so. I'll just do a little bit of rotate C here. Don't really want to do a ton of that, but a little bit. I really like that there's not much twist in this. It's not something that I really want to accentuate, is the twist in a shot like this. I want to keep it pretty minimal, but still want to get a little bit in there because it is body mechanics. So see, like that, there's a little hint of twisting there. And we'll go ahead and kind of offset that in the chest as as well as we move along. But let's shift the hips a little bit over the planted foot there, and a little bit over that planted foot, vice versa, back, and then we'll zero it out again. And let's look at our graph and clean that up a little bit. Bring that down, up. Again, we just want a little bit of this, kind of keep the hips fairly neutral here. But that way we get, it feels a little more like it's realistic movement there. And all we're doing is really just trying to create the illusion of life. So, let's make sure we continue that. And let's do a little bit of rotate Y here. Actually, I think this would be more of a Z. Let's see. Yeah, let's go the other way with our rotate Y. This is when it gets a little bit unformulaic for sure. When you're approaching stuff, especially if you're doing kind of a side one, you're not going to get the same amount of movement there. There we go. We can still get that little bit of twist in there. And let's try and do a little bit of rotate Z here. And a little bit there. A little bit there. And a little bit there. And then bring it back up. Okay. And that might be something that we really minimize too. I still want to try and get a little hint of that in there, but not too much. So let's see. There we go. That feels pretty good. And I do want to do a little bit of compression here, so before I get too far, let's pull that back, pull it forward, that back, that forward, and that way we can get that little bit of squash in the belly area. We'll just offset it in the chest. And this one I do like to try and keep very minimal whenever I'm doing something like this, because otherwise it can look too seahorsey or seesawy, and it's just something that you want to add a little bit in and use the root controller and then offset it with the chest, just so that you can get that little bit of squashiness in the belly, because most rigs don't have like a belly controller or anything in there. And that keeps that area feeling a little more fleshy, which is really something that you want, and not have it feel so rigid in the tummy area. And it's more of an aesthetic choice as well, so let me know if you guys end up liking that and do that in your animations, or if you kind of shy away from that. So let's see. Let's actually clean this up before we go in there a little bit more, and then we'll see how it's working and see if we need to flip things around or how we did. And again, this is one that I will keep pretty tight. Again, I don't want to feel robotic, but I just want a little bit of this. So I usually tend to keep these pretty even. That feels way too much, so it's actually go the other way around here. There we go. Just did the inverse there. Evidently didn't offset right. I accentuated, so that feels a little better. And with this one, let's just do a light swing here. Back here, forward there, back here, and forward there. Again, not a lot, but just a little bit of a swing there. And that's probably more than I even want with that, so let's tone it down. And it'd be okay right now if we weren't doing forearm and hand animation, but if we're doing that, it's going to be just too noticeable. So let's grab this guy and forward and bring it back and 35 forward, back again. move might have been a little too much, so let's scale that back a little bit more. Yeah, let's take a look at it now. Again, we don't really want a full-on swing, but just a little bit of movement in there. And we'll go ahead and do there, back, forward, and back. And then kind of go into that root. And don't think we did such a great job on that, so let's minimize it a little bit more and accentuate the other opposite direction. Didn't really get very much back, just forward here, so let's see. Now we could definitely go further with this. I feel like we neutered it a little too much. And let's, with the hand, what should we do? Maybe we'll go from here to just kind of like a more extended straight arm. So we'll kind of just move between two key poses here. So let's take this and really pretty straightforward and do feel like the wrist is a little broken there. So let's see. Do we like that or not really? It's kind of like hold up there, buddy. Hold it. Let's maybe not go as far with that. And maybe we can twist it more, and it starts to deform there. Yeah, that could work. And then we'll take the fingers here. And this is going to be more of a pose-to-pose approach, so we're going to kind of favor one pose and then get into the other one and do a little overshoot and kind of recoil there. Okay, so let's save our file again. We'll go here, do a little more relaxed, and then shoot it out. So we'll have kind of our starting one. We'll relax it a little bit more, then hyperextend it and pull it back. Okay, so let's make sure we grab everything and lock in our first couple of keys that we liked here. Again, we just want to set that. Set that. And kind of have our overextend and relax. drawing's just real muddy, so let's grab everything there. Those guys. We'll set that and then hold that for a little bit longer. And give me a couple more frames to get into there. Let's actually go for 10 frames for the first hold. So let's see. Set that. Ease into there a little more. So let's see. Punch into that a little bit more. And then we'll do a little bit of movement from that first one to that last one, so we don't totally pixel lock there. So we got a little bit of acting in that move, and the rest is kind of body mechanics there. And then one thing I do want to do is I want to take these two and delay them a frame, and the wrist and delay that a frame as well. So we got kind of that successive movements of the upper arm will move, then the forearm, and then the wrist. And let's go and look at that. We get a little bit of that. And let's take all of the fingers there, and we'll delay them a frame as well. And then we'll take all of our mid and ends, and we'll delay those a frame, and all of our ends, and we'll delay those a frame, just so we get that successive movement throughout the fingers. And then I'll take everything here, we'll push it forward a frame, and everything there, we'll delay it a frame. That way that would break up the movement on the hand a little bit more. And I think I'll take, try to accentuate this kind of hold here. About 2 frames. There we go. And we'll take the thumb, and we'll move that forward a frame. Okay, I'm going to save that, and let's look at the fingers on the other hand. Then we'll do a little bit in the head, and I think that might call it for today. I'll be at least at a working point in that regard, and then we could always polish up stuff even more if you want to. I've been thinking, and I don't know if this is something you guys would be interested in, so let me know in the comments down below about including on the blog a copy that you guys could download of the Maya file in case you wanted to like leaf through it yourself. So if that's something that you guys are thinking of, I don't know, it's just something that I guess wasn't really available to myself when I was first learning, and another thing that maybe could help people who are just learning. You could break apart an animation file and see, you know, how the approach was, and it's something that, you know, even though I try to go through everything in these videos, I don't know that I always am super showing everything, even though I feel like I am. So if you think that's something that would be helpful to just have a free Maya file of the animation to download afterwards, you could kind of leaf through it. It's something that I was thinking that might be fun to try out. But I don't know if there would be very ton of interest in that. So let me know if that's something you guys think would be a helpful asset. Because I'm really trying to do with these videos that I mentioned before is really offer a resource that wasn't available to myself when I was first learning. That, it's kind of a first step if you can, or maybe a second step after you download a program and download a file, before, or the stepping stone before you go off and pay for an animation school or pay at college. You could kind of do this stuff, and I think it would give you definitely a leg up if you could get to at least this level, or start to understand these concepts before you even enter an animation class. Because I know for sure for myself, I felt opening Maya for the first time was a little daunting when I was first learning, and if I would have had resources like this, I think it would have been very helpful. So let me know down in the comments below. Like I said, the reason I do this stuff is for you guys to to encourage you and inspire you, hopefully, and also to offer pretty much a free animation education for you guys each and every day. And let's do a little bit of bob in the head. This is probably going to be too much, but I want to get some movement in the head here. So let's see. Let's tone it down and then delay the frame. Just so there's a little bit of movement there. I think that'll work for today. So let's take a look back at where we started. Like I said, with any of these files, this is kind of just the first hour or so of animating a shot. So there's always more that we could clean up and play around with, and get into lighting and rendering and all that stuff. But I think that's a good workable version for right now. I wonder if there's anything in the face controller itself. I always like to try and do a little bit of movement in there. I see if there's like a bunch of things here, so let's just see if we can do a jaw controller. Yeah, do a little bit there, just to loosen up that face a little bit. And yeah, it looks like there's a lot we could do there. Looks like this rig might actually be fun to do some lip sync with. It seems like it's an interesting hinge this jaw has, which is more that, like I said, a blend of translate and rotate, which is important to do in any sort of lip sync or mouth opening. You want to not just go up and down, but have a little bit of a rotation in there. And it looks like at least this jaw controller definitely does that. I think that's really cool. Not a lot of rigs do that. I think this is probably one of the first times that I've really seen a rig have a great jaw controller. Although, just to play devil's advocate or pessimist or anything, probably would prefer having two separate ones so that I could control it a little bit tighter. But as far as just, that's probably too much. We just want to do a hint of up and down there. Let's see, just to keep the face feeling fleshy there. And let's delay that a frame as well. Okay. Let's turn our curves off again. Go ahead and loop that. And we'll go ahead and take a look back at where we started. We're looking at the beautiful work of Arthur Adams. He said, after I decided that's what I wanted to do, that's all I ever wanted to do. So find out what it is that drives you, that's your passion about, and make that your life goal. And don't let anyone stand in your way, and pursue that dream, and throw passion behind it, and change the world. So if you guys are watching this, you guys are the creative future. So go out there, create, use that imagination, use that stuff that makes you uniquely you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you can keep on being inspired and motivated even when you don't watch the videos or anything, but it'll show up in your subscription feed, something new every day, and maybe it'll cause you to think and reminder to go off and create something amazing for yourself and for everyone. I love you guys lots, and I think that'll do it for today, so we'll see you for some more animation tomorrow.